The next thing we're going to be looking at is how we can actually add content to our pages. I will go into my pages section, which we created a bunch of pages but did not insert any content into them. I'm going to go to my About Us page, and here I will be greeted with the editor. Based on the theme that you've chosen, you will have the option to choose a pattern. I'm simply going to close this and just focus on the editor. We don't need any of those patterns because we can actually build our own layouts and have full control over how we want the page to look. WordPress is currently using the Gutenberg block editor. This replaced the classic editor back in 2018, I believe. And this is a modular system that allows you to create content using individual blocks. And blocks could be paragraphs, headings, images, columns. There's all sorts of things that we can utilize. This approach makes it a little bit easier to create complex layouts and control the appearance of your content. You can think of the blocks almost like Legos, where you could just stack different blocks together and build something completely different. So before we actually get into using it, let me just show you a couple important places on our page editing page. The first area is going to be the content canvas. That's this middle section, and this is where we actually are going to begin creating content that will ultimately display on our website. Over here on the right, we have something called the settings panel. This panel is used to configure the block settings, and based on what sort of block is selected, you will have different options here. So the first tab that we're looking at is the page option. This is just more generic page-based options. And then we have the block setting, and you can see I have no blocks selected, so this doesn't really do much for me, but you will see that this does change. On the left, if you click this plus tab right here, this is going to open something called the inserter. The inserter is a panel that allows you to choose what type of blocks you want to insert into your canvas. And as you can see, there are a bunch of different sorts of blocks. They are organized by different categories. For the most part in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on the text-based blocks. We'll use some images, and then we'll touch upon the design-based blocks. Let's go ahead and get started by adding some content onto our page. There are a couple of different ways that you can create a block. So right here on my page, if I just click, this is creating the first default block. So I'm just going to make a page title. And then if I want to control this text, because this basically is a paragraph block, I can change what I've done here by using this little pull down menu. And I'm going to switch this to a heading. And then you can choose the different types of headings. So H1, H2 through H6. I'm going to make this an H2. And we have some options to align the element. This is going to align the element more on responsive based sorts of designs. So I'm just going to leave this at the default. We'll come back and revisit this a little bit later. This alignment controls how your text is aligned within the block. And then we can do things like highlight the text and make the text bold or italic or both. You can also create links. And then we have this little option right here, which will give you more options. So if I wanted my text to be superscript or subscript, I could do this here. We also have these three dots, which is going to allow us to access additional options. We don't need to do anything here, so I'll just leave this as is. Now that we have this heading block, if I click within the block and we look over here on the right on our settings panel, you can see that we have different options here. So it's going to give you a little summary of what a heading is. There's some default styles that are built in, and these may change based on the theme that you have installed. You can easily change your text color, and there's some preset text colors here. Or if you want complete control, you can click in the color chip, and then you'll have access to a color picker, and you can pick any color that you want. You also have the option to add a background color. So if you wanted to do that, you could easily add a background color. And if you ever want to get rid of these things, you can click clear, and that will just reset these back to the defaults. In addition to that, we can control the size of the text. And again, if you start to mess around with this and want to just get back, you can use the 3 dots and just click reset all. Before I do that, we do have some different categories here. So I've been messing around with size, but I can choose font, and I can change the font family. The font family is going to be tied to the theme that you're using. So I only have 2 options, but a little bit later on, I'll show you how we can alter this. If I go into the appearance setting, this is going to give me appearance settings so I can make my text bold, semi-bold, light, etc. And then we have options for line height, letter spacing, text space decoration, orientation, and letter case. So let's say I wanted my text to all be uppercase, I could easily do that. If I decide I don't want any of these, I can come to these 3 dots and just click reset all, and this will reset back to whatever the default settings were. Additionally, we can control the dimensions of this element by adding padding and margin. Padding is going to appear on the inside of the block box. Margin is on the outside. You can also add a border, and you can control the radius of that border. So at this point, if I went back to my dimensions and added some padding, you can see that there's more space on the inside, and this is controlling the top and bottom, and then I have the right and the left. And once again, I'm just going to reset all and reset the border settings as well. There is an option for advanced settings. This allows you to assign a unique class if you want to create your own custom CSS or add an HTML anchor. Some of these settings may be different depending on the type of block that you're using, so do keep that in mind. They will not always display the exact same options because this is contextual based on the block. If we want to create a new block, you can come over here to your inserter, and you can simply click on one of these options, and now I have a paragraph block. So I'll enter some text for my paragraph. I can make modifications over here on the right if I need to, and really begin to build my page. Now, at this point, I am going to bring in some text that I have created in another application. I tend to create my text in more of a word editor so that I can easily spell check and share it with my client and then insert it into my WordPress project. So I'm just going to use Command or Control V or Edit Paste to paste these in. It is worth mentioning that at this point, I have made multiple blocks. And if we go to the document overview, these 3 lines right here, this is going to give you an overview of all of the blocks that you're using on your page. So here's the header we started with, our first paragraph, and then we have a couple of additional paragraphs. You can see that our mission is a paragraph. I may want to change that into a heading, and I'm going to use a heading of size 3, so I can alter that. Then I have my next paragraph, and then I have a list, and the list can open and we can actually see the list items. So if we were to click on our list, you can see that the settings over here are going to change a little bit based on options that are available for a list. So I could have a check mark display instead of the default bullets that may display. You can also easily reorganize things here. So if you wanted to change the order, if I wanted our mission to be underneath the H1, I could just drag this up. And I find that this area is usually the easiest place to organize our blocks. You can just grab them here and rearrange them if necessary. In addition to what I've just showed you, we do have additional tools, edit and select, are available here. Edit is the default tool. And we do have this undo. So if you ever wanted to go back, you could undo. This over here on the right is redo. And anytime you want to get back to the block inserter, you can click the plus sign and it'll take you right back to the block inserter. In addition to inserting elements in this way, there are a couple other options that you have. So when you are working on your page, if you click in a new area, you will get a little plus sign, and this will allow you to add a block. This will only show you a few commonly used blocks or recently used blocks. If you want to have access to more, you're going to click Browse All. And I also want to mention, if you are using this and you know the name of the block, like let's say I want to do a spacer, I can search for spacer and then that will bring this up. And now I have a spacer block. So a spacer block just allows you to create more space between elements. I might want to move this in between the first paragraph and our second header. You can use the little up arrow here, as well as the method that I showed you before, which was using our list view and organizing things. The spacer can be manually adjusted in regards to the height, or you could numerically plug in a value. So if I wanted to have more space appear between these, I can just plug that in. When this is highlighted, it will appear gray, but if you hover away, it's just going to be a blank white space. It's not going to have any color assigned to it. If you do want to make changes to this, you would need to click on the Style tab, and then this will give you access to any sort of styles that you may have available. I'm going to delete this block, so I will go to the three dots right here, and I'll just select Delete. And then I'm going to grab a separator item, so I'll click plus, and down here we do have a separator. I'm going to drag this in. This time I'm dragging it right to my page. A separator just allows you to create a line to separate content out. So I'm just going to make a light gray, and you can obviously choose how wide you want the line to be. If you want it to be displayed as dots, I'm going to use default. You can alter the margin, which is the spacing around the line. So we'll go ahead and make that small. Sometimes it can be difficult to select a block. This is where the list view comes in handy. So if I click my separator, I can easily highlight the separator and then make any sort of changes that I want to this particular element. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add an image, and I want an image to appear after my headline right here. So I will go ahead and click my plus sign. I'm going to grab an image and I'm just going to drag this in. Because I dragged the image to the left of the text, you can see that the text now appears to the right of the image. If we look in our document overview, I have now created something called a row. The row allows me to create elements that are going to appear side by side. And if I select the row, these are the options we have. We can group these elements together. They'll be stacked on top of each other. I can use the transform to stack, which again stacks them, or I can use a transform to grid, which allows us to create multiple columns and or rows. But I'm going to use this row feature right here. To make the image appear, I need to click inside of this particular block. I have the option to upload a new image, access something from my media library, or insert an image that is already being hosted on the web. I will select media library. I'm going to choose one of the images that I've already uploaded and click select. And then we can use these little handles to control the sizing of this element. So I'm going to want this to be a little bit larger. This image is currently selected. I previously added some alt text that shows up, but this can be changed if you need to alter it. And we could numerically type in a width or a height value if we need to. We also can go to styles and control things like the margin, the padding, if we want to have a border on our image. You really have a lot of different options in regards to choosing how you want this element to be styled. Let's go ahead and let's add one more image. This time we're going to do this a little bit differently. So we are going to have this set of text, which is a paragraph, a list, and a paragraph, appear on the left, and we'll put an image on the right. To do something like this, we're going to want to create a column or multiple columns, which is located underneath the design area. So I'm going to go ahead and create a column block. I'm just going to drag this in right here. And then you can choose the type of columns that you want. So do you want a 50-50 split? Do you want a 1/3, 2/3, 2/3, 1/3, multiple columns? And you can always customize this too. I am going to choose a 2/3, 1/3 column. So if I look right here, I now have two columns. Sometimes these can be a little bit hard to see, but if you go to your list view, you can see here are the two columns. So when I hover over, we can see each of these. I want to move these three items into the first column. So I'm going to select those and I can just grab them and drag them underneath column 1. So now these items have been pasted or moved into column 1. They now exist here. And in column 2, I will insert another image. First thing I need to do is click inside the column, the plus sign, and then I can choose a block element. We're going to get an image. Once again, I'll go to my media library. I will choose one of the images that I've already uploaded. I'm going to select that, and I can adjust any of the settings just like we did above, but I think this is okay. The one thing that I do want to do for my image is I want to control where it sits inside of the column. So by default, it's up at the top of the column. If we select the column, we can then control the vertical alignment. So if I wanted to align this in the middle, I could choose this option. You'll need to play around with this a little bit and experiment with some of these different settings so that you're choosing the correct element when you're making a change. The other thing that I want to caution you about is that sometimes what you see here is not completely accurate in the rendered portion. So once you have your page set up, you'll probably want to save it, and then you'll want to open that page in the browser. I already have my Terradiem website open in a different tab, so I'm just going to click About Us, and this is my About Us page. So you can see this image is super tiny. It doesn't look how it did in the preview area. So we would need to go back here and make some alterations to our particular row. I'm just going to stretch this out a little bit. We'll click Save, and I'll preview it in the browser. It's a tiny bit bigger, but it still doesn't look accurate. In all honesty, sometimes this can be a little bit frustrating. So in lieu of doing this, I'm just going to create another column like we did before instead of using this row feature right here, because the row feature is not really working for me. It's allowing us to set up these images, but we are not really able to control the width of the columns that are basically created by this row. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this. If we go to the three dots right here, we can go ahead and we can click Add Before. And this is going to create a new block type. I'm going to just hit the plus button here. I will select column, and this time I'm going to do a 50-50 split. So I have a new column, and then I'm just going to drag my image into the first column and my text into the second column. And at this point, I no longer need the row. I'll come to these three dots and hit delete. And I think that looks okay here, but let's just save this, and we will look at this in the actual rendered browser. You can see now that the size of my image is a little bit more accurate. I might want to adjust the spacing between these items. It looks like it's much larger in the browser. Here it's a little bit more narrow. So if we select on our column, the single column, we can control the padding on the right and the left. So if I increase this padding, you can see that I can possibly make this a little bit bigger. Visually, this didn't change here, so let's save this and go back to the browser and upload, and you can see here it's more significant. So that's a little too much. I'm going to make this back to being tiny, and I will save again, and then we'll come back here and preview this and see if this is indeed what we want. There are a couple other ways that you could adjust this. You could come to the various columns. So I have 2 columns and adjust the padding or spacing on both. You could also come to the column tab itself. And if we go to styles, we can adjust the spacing here. So here we have the block spacing, which is the spacing in between these elements. And you can see when this is none, it almost looks like they're overlaying on top of each other. I'm going to leave this at tiny where they're still overlaying, but if we save this and go back to our rendered page, you can see that it adjusts it. Just keep in mind that even though you see something like this here, it's not always going to be completely accurate. The other option that you might be able to do to get a more accurate rendition is if you come to the options up in the upper right hand corner, your settings panel, you can get out of this full screen mode or turn off the top toolbar. The top toolbar is this area right here. So if I uncheck this, the toolbar, if I have nothing selected, the toolbar potentially could go away or give me less options. If I go into full screen mode, I can view my WordPress toolbar. You may not want that to be present. Sometimes that just kind of gets in the way, so sometimes I'll turn that off. But you do have options here in how you want this page to render. Needless to say, this is a quick overview on the Gutenberg block editor, and this is just the core block editor. I have not enhanced the behavior of this by using any plugins. There are some that will allow you to alter how the block editor works, and we can look at those a little bit later on. But for now, I just wanted to get you familiar with using the default block editor and being able to have a little bit more control over the layout of your page. There are a lot of options in the block editor, so I would encourage you to start with simple blocks and then gradually explore more advanced features. You'll want to practice and just play around with this and experiment and see what is possible. The more you use this, the more comfortable you're going to feel. And just do keep in mind that what you see right here in this preview window is not always 100% accurate. You'll want to save your page and really give it a proper preview in the browser in addition to trying to design it here.